raids by Nausicaan pirates continued to disrupt shipping lines on the edges of Federation space. Angry at what they perceive as a lack of response by Starfleet and the Federation government, the Federation Transport Union recommends that its members refuse any official cargoes without adequate protection. This causes a crisis for the Federation government. With so many Starfleet vessels assigned to Romulan and Cardassian relief efforts, the government has been relying heavily on civilian ships for routine deliveries to Federation worlds and protectorates. But the Union's actions threaten everything from shipment of replicators to Alpha Centauri to emergency medical supplies destined for Russia 4. Federation President Munieta Bako meets personally with the leaders of the Transport Union, but the Union refuses to budge on what he says is an essential safety issue. Too many ships and too many crews have been lost to Nausicaan raids. Presidential aides suggest that Starfleet vessels assigned to exploration and science missions could be rerouted to border defense, but many of those ships are in deep space and it could take them months to return. Starfleet Command reluctantly agrees to pull back from the Klingon-Romulan border and reassign those ships to patrol the shipping routes. Leaders of some of the Romulan colony worlds howl with indignation that the Federation has broken promises of protection, but those voices are silenced after a sharp rebuke from Admiral Taris. "We are Romulan. We fight our own battles. I would rather see Romulans die with pride in their hearts and swords in their hands instead of mewing for protection like scared younglings." With the Federation withdrawn from the Romulan border, Chancellor Martok agrees to honor his promise to participate in Federation-mediated peace talks with the Gorn. Representatives from the Klingons, Gorn, and Nausicaans converge on Deep Space K7 for the conference, and the Federation sends some of its most celebrated diplomats to facilitate the talks. Initial progress appears promising, but 2 days into the conference, an explosive device hidden in a serving cart seriously injures Ambassador Zagozin of the Gorn. The Klingon, Gorn, and Nausicaan delegations make plans for immediate departure, but are blocked from leaving the station by Starfleet security, which locks down the station during the hunt for Zagozin's attacker. 2 days after the attack, Jada, a Klingon with the ties to the extremist group opposed to Martok's rule, is found dead. Security officers determined that Jada was killed by a disruptor blast at close range and shot out an airlock hours after the explosion that injured Zagozin. If Jada's body had not snagged on a piece of station, it may have been lost. Forensic evidence proves that the Jada was the person who planted the explosive that injured the Gorn ambassador, but his killer is not found. Journals left behind in Jada's quarters indicate that his intended target may have been the Federation negotiation team, who all escaped unscathed. After the attack, talks between the Klingons and the Gorn break down. The Klingons push their advance into Gorn territory, and the Gorn, mindful of the need to protect their homeworld, move ships away from their outlying territories. King Sladis approaches the Lithians for additional assistance, but most outside analysts believe that the Gorn do not have the spare resources to hire Lithian mercenaries and still pay the prices commanded by the Nausicaans for their support. With the withdrawal of Federation ships from the Klingon-Romulan border, hardliners on the Klingon High Council push for a resumption of the stalled Romulan campaign. Martok and his followers urge caution, preferring to concentrate on the Gorn War and building up the Klingon Defense Force to pre-Dominion war levels. Rebuffed by Martok, Chancellor Jim Plot gathers ship commanders loyal to his house and the houses of his allies and invades the Zeta Pictoris system. They clash with a Romulan fleet commanded by Admiral Taris, and the Romulans force the Klingons to retreat. Survivors of the battle report the appearance of highly advanced starships on the Romulan side, but their existence cannot be confirmed. Martok orders Klingon intelligence to look into the reports in more detail, and the Chos battle group is dispatched to investigate. Federation political analysts say that while the Klingon hardliners' campaign in the Zeta Pictoris system was a failure, Jumplok's point was made. If Martok is unwilling to lead the Klingons into battle, there are others who will do so. The High Council begins to divide between those who are loyal to Martok and those who would prefer new leadership. Taris' victory in the Zeta Pictoris system rallies the Romulans, who have been desperately seeking a sign of their former glory. Rator III is the first to proclaim Taris as the leader of the Romulan Star Empire, quickly followed by the Achenar Prime and more than a dozen other worlds. In an address broadcast throughout the Empire, Taris says, "I am a military commander, and I would prefer to remain so. The seas of politics are rife with submerged hazards and hidden perils, and a wise person does well to avoid them. But my empire calls, and I cannot resist her plea." Taris calls on the leaders of the colony worlds to meet on Rator III to select representatives for a new Romulan Senate and make plans to organize a government and build a new capital. A Federation operative inserted into the fleet that departed Romulan space with Sela in 2386 has reported that Sela and her followers have landed on Makar, an M-class planet in the Beta Quadrant with the abundant supplies of decalithium and heavy metals. A humanoid race with a technology equivalent to Earth's Iron Age, inhabited two of Makar's temperate southern continents, but Sela sees the population as an additional natural resource, and within weeks her forces have hundreds of Makarans working in the mines. The operative also reports that Sela's ship picked up a signal that was similar to the artificial quantum singularities the Romulans used to power their warp drives, as well as signs of a massive gravitational field. Sela has dispatched 2 ships to investigate these anomalies. The Cardassian Daytapa Council scores a major victory when it concludes negotiations with the Ferengi Grand Magus realm for assistance in rebuilding their industrial complexes. Rome will provide the funding to rebuild factories, design houses and replication facilities, as well as returning several valuable Gemonite artifacts sacred to the followers of the Aurelians to the Cardassian Ministry of Culture. In return, Rome receives exclusive trade agreements for the Cardassian trade goods once the factories reopen. While Ram is mocked by many Ferengi for his lack of lobes when it comes to the business, if the deal succeeds, it could be one of the most lucrative arrangements in recent memory. On Earth, the Federation Supreme Court rules in favor of Philippa Louvois and the holonovel publishers and programmers she represents, saying that the acts of the Cumberland will not apply to the non-sentient holographic or artificial lifeforms. They returned the Sun Foundation's class action suit to a lower court to determine what defines sentience in a legal sense. Not content with pursuing its agenda in the courts, the Sun Foundation launches a campaign to lobby Federation votes to add rights for artificial lifeforms to the Federation Constitution. Responding to the possibility of Species 8472 appearing in Federation space, Starfleet Command assigns a task force to investigate any possible appearances of the race. A skilled team of scientists, diplomats, and security experts will be looking into any sign that the species is in the Alpha Quadrant and formulating possible plans of action. As a start to their research, the team is conducting extensive interviews of the crew of the Enterprise E, which found the anomalies in the McAllister C5 Nebula, and former crew members of Voyager, which is the only Starfleet ship known to have definitive contact with the mysterious aliens. And citing the success of the extremely diverse crews of the USS Titan and her sister ships, Starfleet assigns a committee to consider expanding the admission standards at Starfleet Academy to provide more opportunities for races that are formally allied with the Federation but are not full member worlds. Not everyone knows a Starfleet captain and can get a personal recommendation. That doesn't mean they wouldn't be fine officers, said spokesperson Marie Duran. On stardate 68912.6 in Croatian province in European hegemony on Earth, Miodrag Milisavljević is born in the city of Zadar. He will later become one of the most important people in Starfleet history.